and so that we can go ahead and view this later if we need to. So I'm working on figuring out why I cannot see everybody. But it's okay. Today we will only see Miss Brown for the presentation. And I've got my student list open. All right. We don't worry, guys. Technology will not defeat us. So today we are talking about, and hopefully you've read a little bit about the chapter or a little bit of the chapter, but we're really today and tomorrow focused on the diversity of our students, right? And so I want you to understand that you may teach in a place that's very ethnically diverse, very different from the place where you're going to school, okay? Like I said, we tend to focus on Texas, but the United States as a whole is a very unique place. It's a very diverse place. And so we're talking about how that diversity has changed over time, okay? And so race and ethnicity are two different things, okay? What we talk about with race and ethnicity, there are only, the United States only recognizes a certain amount of racial groups. And so what we can look at, and I'm not sharing my screen with you yet. The United States Census, and I'm going to share this with you really quick. Here we go, share my screen. That was the wrong button. Present now, my entire screen. Okay, so the United States Census recognizes 5 racial groups, okay? So remember that the census is something that happens every 10 years. This is a census year in the United States right now. And so the United States Census recognizes five racial groups, okay? You are a white person, a person having origins in the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, okay? That's one racial group. Then you have Blacks or African Americans. You have American Indians or Alaska Natives. You have Asians. And then you have North Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, okay? So according to the U.S. Census, you have 5 racial groups, okay? Ethnicity is different, and ethnicity deals with subgroups, okay? So while I may be white, I may be ethnically Jewish. I might be ethnically Polish. I might be ethnically French. And so ethnicity has to do with the subpopulation of that race. While I might be an American Indian, I might ethnically be Cherokee or Ojibwe. I might be Asian, but ethnically I am a Filipino, or I am Chinese, or I am Korean. And so ethnic groups are about the small groups that... Guys, my allergies are so bad right now. I'm so sorry. Thank you. And so your race is about the big group. Your ethnicity is about the small group within the larger group. So when we talk about these groups in our classrooms, in our schools, we need to understand that the United States that exists right now is very different from the United States that existed 100 years ago. And so the United States population, as of the publication of this book, with the book that you have, is 65% white. Now, I have been hearing this since I was in high school, that by 2025, the majority of people in the United States would be non-white. That is still true. okay? The thing is that this non-white population, when we talk about non-white, remember we're talking about 5 races. So if we eliminate one of those races, we say most of the population is non-white, that means that the remainder of the population is African American, American Indian or Alaskan, Asian, and my mind went blank. Who can tell me what the 5th one is? Because we had white, African American, Asian, because Asian Pacific Islander, and Hawaiian Pacific Island, Hawaiian and American Indian. So that's a bunch of people, right? And then within those remaining 4 races, you have a lot of ethnicities. Students of color, and that's what we tend to say, white students and students of color. Students of color were 35% of the school population in 1995. By 2020, which is this year, the non-white population in schools is 49%. Okay? For us here in the Valley, for us specifically in this classroom, what we tend to see is that our teachers are people of color. That is not true across the state. And so when we talk about diversity in the classroom, we're also talking about the diversity of teachers. So one of the questions that I've seen, especially with what's happening politically and what's happening in current events in the United States, is one of the questions that I saw in one of the teacher groups that I'm in is, what age were you, what grade were you in when you had your first Black teacher? And for a lot of us, for myself, I did not have a Black teacher in public school the entire time that I was in public school. I did not have a Black teacher as a coworker until I was teaching at Palmview High School, my 4th year teaching. And so we think about diversity as something that happens in other places. But we really need to take into account that here where we are in the Valley, here where we are teaching, are we aware of diversity? Are we cognizant that there are other ethnic and racial groups? And then how do we address that diversity with our students? So we tend to be more comfortable with people of our own race, people of our own ethnic group. But we, again, and I'm going to bring this up again, we might not be teaching in the places where we grew up. And so we need to make sure that when we are talking about diversity, we are being inclusive of everyone. So with that in mind, teachers are changing, and teachers, you guys that are becoming teachers, future educators, are starting to more and more reflect the diversity of the students that you will teach, okay? How many, and I want you to think about this, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. How many male teachers did you have in elementary school? Just elementary school. And I'm going to call on 4 of you. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about how many male teachers did you have in elementary school? All right, so let me, because I've got this cool new feature over here, let me randomize the person. Let's see, update the list. Okay, that's not what I'm trying to do. Well, that's not going to work. Okay, so let me see. Dominique, how many male teachers did you have in elementary school?
I had one male substitute teacher.
Okay, so not a full-time teacher, substitute teacher. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Dominique. Jacqueline Silva, how many male teachers did you have in elementary school? Okay, so 0. So that's I'm going to count yours as a 0, Dominique, just because I wasn't clear, but I was thinking of your permanent teachers. All right, so Jacqueline and Dominique, 0 male teachers. Luis Martinez, how many male teachers did you have in elementary school? 2. Okay, and those 2 teachers that you had, what did they teach? Okay, so pre-K and first grade. But I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Luis? Okay, cool, awesome. And Valeria Lucio, any male teachers in elementary school?
Only one.
And what did he teach, Valeria?
It was first grade.
Okay. So out of 4 people surveyed, we had 2 teachers, right? So 50% had a male teacher in elementary school. Now I'm going to ask this same question. How many male teachers did you have or have you had in high school? Okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think. How many male teachers have you had in high school? And I'm going to ask again, I'm going to ask 4 people. So I want you to just think about male teachers in high school. All right, Martin. Male teachers. What was the question? How many male teachers have you had in high school?
I got 5.
5, right? So I'm going to count with you. Mr. Cantu, yes?
Cantu, Bernal, Flores,
Saldaña, Garza, Villarreal.
Villarreal, and then my SC teacher was
Okay, and then did you take health or PE?
I took health.
Okay, so okay.
And PE was the lady.
Oh, with Coach Chavez.
Yes, before the freshman came.
Okay, so actually you had 8 male teachers in high school. Awesome. Okay, and then Jackie Salazar. Thank you, Martin. Jackie Salazar. How many male teachers have you had in high school?
5.
5. Tell me who your 5 are. And Silva, yeah. So that's 5. Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. And Esmer, how about you? How many male teachers have you had in high school?
This year?
Yes. Oh, no, not yet, because technically you haven't started high school yet this year.
5.
5, right? So tell me your 5. Flores and Saldaña. Okay, so that's 5. And then Alicia, thank you, Esmer. Alicia, how many male teachers have you had in high school? Only Mr. Cantu so far, right? You haven't taken health or PE, Alicia? Okay. Perfect. Oh, was your coach a male coach or female? Female coach. Okay. So look at the difference, right? In elementary, we tend to have female teachers. In high school, we've got about a 50-50, right? So if you look at the 9th grade team, last year 9th grade had 1 male teacher. This year they have 2 because Miss Queen is gone and now we have Mr. Hinojosa teaching Algebra 1. In 10th grade, 2 male teachers, 2 female teachers, still the same this year. In 11th grade, 3 male teachers, 1 female teacher. This year, it's going to be 2 and 2 because Ms. Navarro is going to be the 11th grade English teacher. Senior year, you had Ms. Charles and Ms. Navarro, and then 2 male teachers. This year it's going to be 3 male teachers, 1 female teacher. And then in your electives, it was about 50-50. So why is that different? Why is there a shift in male to female from primary to secondary? What do you think, Genesis? Why do you think that we tend to have less male teachers at the elementary level?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. It's maybe back then, or not really, because back then, I don't know. I don't want to say something
And that's okay, right? Because we really don't think about it, right? We probably have never thought about it before when we've been in class, right? Like it's just a teacher. You don't think about like, oh, it's a male teacher versus it's a female teacher. Had you ever thought about it before?
at first in elementary, it was weird because most of the time, like my in first grade and second, it was all female. And then when I went to third grade, I had a male, and then I was like, it's weird that now I have a male teacher.
Yeah, right. And we tend to have female teachers in elementary. I'll give you the reason why, and I'm gonna let Luis and Martin and Luis tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. We're more interested in as women. We don't mind messy babies, right? We have kind of been trained as women, as females, that it's kind of our job to take care of like messy babies, right? Whereas our males are raised and told as children that messy babies are women's things. So women teachers tend to be more interested in teaching younger students, the early childhood, right? Because pre-K kinder, messy boogers, can't tie their shoes. Sometimes they come out of the bathroom with their pants unbuckled because they can't buckle their pants. Whereas at the high school and the middle school, they've figured that out. They're not messy babies anymore. In high school, we can talk about more serious things. And so then we can have more adult conversations with students at the high school. And so we tend to find more male teachers at the high school and the middle school. Does that make sense, Luis, and Martin?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think that is, like, as society as a whole, right, women tend to be seen more as like the gender that takes care of children,
Mm-hmm.
and are seen as, most of the time, they're not seen as teachers in their way. So, like, in my opinion, I think that if they see a man who's in an elementary, a lot of people are gonna feel discomfort to see that man with little kids.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And men feel weird being around little kids because they don't want other people to know.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. And that's something that we need to work on all over, right? I have, and we tend to see. I'm gonna stay on track, and then I'll go off track. We tend to see our elementary male teachers mostly as PE coaches, maybe music teachers, and then your fifth grade, fourth grade teachers, right? That's where we tend to see our male elementary teachers. And then in high school, they're everywhere, right? We've got men everywhere. But culturally, as a society, we also tend to have this idea that the realm of children is also the realm of women, and that needs to change, right? Because and how many of y'all have heard people say, "Oh, I'm going out and my husband's going to babysit the kids." Well, he's not babysitting your kids because they're not your kids. They're also his kids, right? And so that's something that we need to think about, because when we get these students in our classrooms, they are also coming with their biases, their preconceptions. They're from their home, they're coming with, this is what women do and this is what men do. And so as female teachers, you're going to run into some kids that, if I don't listen to mom at home, why am I going to listen to you at school, lady? And the same thing with your male students. At home, dad is not there, and I don't have a male figure having to tell me what to do. So who are you, Mr. Teacher Man, telling me what to do, right? And so it cuts both ways. There's going to be situations where it's an advantage to be a female teacher, and there's going to be situations where it's a disadvantage. The same for our men. And so the same way that our kids are coming in with preconceptions, we also have to think about what preconceptions, what biases that we have, and then how do we push those aside to be able to teach our classes and to be able to teach whatever student it is that happens to be in our classroom. Because we do not get to decide what students are in our class. Okay, and I'm going to lay that out. I'm going to put that out in the world and make that clear. And then I'm going to tell you why you kind of do get to pick who's in your class. So you are going to be given a bundle of students, right? This is your roster. These are the kids that you have. The only time, this is the caveat, the only time that you get to say, no, this student cannot be in my class, by law, and this is by law, you can say, the student cannot be in my class because they are a disruption to the instructional integrity of my class. Okay, so I am in Ms. Suchil's class. I am a 6th grader, and I'm disruptive, I'm violent, or I'm aggressive, or I yell and scream and make a ruckus. And because I am in that class, the other students cannot learn. Then Ms. Suchil can say, no, Vanessa cannot be in my class. Because at that point, having Vanessa in my class is disruptive to the other kids in my class. And so in order to maintain their instructional integrity, Vanessa has to go. Okay, that's the only time that you can say as a teacher, I'm going to say no to this one student being in my class to safeguard the instruction of these other students. Okay, except, because every rule has an except, right? Except if you are the only teacher who teaches that class. So Miss Brown is the only teacher that teaches forensic science at Jimmy Carter. Yes? Okay, everybody's with me. Stephanie is loud and disruptive, and she hates Miss Brown, and Miss Brown really doesn't like her very much, and so they're in class together. And every time that she comes into class, Stephanie is disruptive and throwing things, and it's a disaster. And so Miss Brown goes to Miss Gomez and says, Miss Brown, I need Stephanie out of my class because she's affecting the instructional integrity for the rest of the class. Miss Brown has to keep Stephanie because there's no other forensic science class for Stephanie to go to. Okay? Now, if I was at a regular high school where maybe 3 teachers taught this class, Ms. Brown could say no, and then Stephanie would go join another class. But in the situation that we're in right now at our campus, that's not an option. You're going to find that that tends to be the case more in elementary than in middle school and high school. Because at the elementary, they are learning behaviors. And when we get to the chapter about classroom management, we'll talk about learning behaviors. But also because in our elementaries, in our district, and it's going to be different. Remember, we tend to use our district as the example, but it's going to be different. You are going to find that some elementaries only have one English teacher or one Spanish teacher. And so if I am the one Spanish teacher and the student that I have concerns with, or the student that is disruptive, has to be in a Spanish class, then I don't have the option to remove that student. And so that's kind of that, yes, this is the rule, but this is where it comes into play. So any questions about that real quick? Because I kind of went off topic, but I got us back. Anybody? Okay, awesome. We don't get that choice. We don't get that option. If you have the student and let's say there's 3 history teachers and Mr. Vasquez doesn't want him and Ms. Gonzalez doesn't want him and Mr. Aguilar doesn't want him. Somebody has to teach that student because the student by law has a right to an education. So at that point, nobody wants them, but somebody has to have them. Flip a coin. Or even you could say, okay, I have a Monday, Tuesday, you have a Wednesday, Thursday, and you have them Friday, and then we've got to figure this out. But the child has a right, the student has a right to an education. So, and that's rough because then we've got to figure out why do we not want this student? And then how do we fix the situation or the student so that he can get the education? And so on that note, because that's a great transition, thank you, Martin, for that question, is the reason we don't want the student tied to their race or ethnicity. Now, I have this class, and listen, teachers are people, okay? Teachers are people, and people have opinions, they have biases, they have political views, they have personal views, they have religious views. People are complicated, right? Now, let's say that Belinda is in my class, and Belinda is the only student in my class that wears a yellow shirt. And I am a teacher that my whole life has been told and truly believes in my heart that people that wear yellow shirts are bad. Belinda wears a yellow shirt. Monday? Really? I had never heard that, Martin.
Yeah, there's some churches that say you can't use your left hand, so if it's left-handed, they teach them how to write with the right hand.
No, I had never heard that, Martin.
Yeah, I saw it in the picture and I put it on my ass too. So, I'm left-handed, so I was like, oh.
What? If I had heard that, I would have used that and you as an example, because my daughter's also left-handed. I had never heard that. So now next year I'll use the left-hand example. Thank you, Martin. I have learned something from you today. I love that. I love when I learn things from my students because that's how it is. We're gonna learn things from each other. So I'll stick with my yellow shirt example because I had that one worked out all in my head. But next year I'll use the left-handed one. So Belinda's in my class. She wears a yellow shirt every day, and I, in my heart of hearts, cannot deal with people that have yellow shirts. do I as a teacher have a right to say, Belinda cannot be in my class because I know that people with yellow shirts are bad? Can I remove her from my class? Anyone want to take a shot at this one and see if I can? You don't think I can? Yeah, I can't, Daniela, you're right. I cannot, because that is based on my opinions and beliefs, and so I cannot. Now, let's raise a level of complexity, right? So Vanessa's in my class, and Vanessa has expressed that she is a homosexual, and my personal religious beliefs are that homosexuality is wrong, and I don't want Vanessa in my class. Can I remove Vanessa from my class? No, absolutely not. Okay, so let's raise it a level of complexity. Vanessa is in my class, and Vanessa is a Muslim, and my personal opinion and beliefs are that Muslims are terrorists, and I don't want her in my class. Can I remove Vanessa from my class? No.
No.
Okay. If the reason that I have a problem is because of my personal beliefs and opinions, the answer is always going to be no. You cannot remove that child from that class. Okay? If that is the reason, the answer is always no. Okay? What are we supposed to do if the student is being racist, saying racial slurs? Okay, that is an excellent question. That is an amazing question, Dominique, because if the student's behavior, okay, remember this, if the student's behavior is disrupting the instructional integrity of your classroom, can I remove the student? Yes. Yes, I can. Because it's not my beliefs and my opinions that are the reason I'm removing the student. It's because of the instructional integrity of my classroom. I cannot teach if student is being racist, saying racist slurs, interrupting my class, disrupting my instruction. Then yes, student can go. If it's my beliefs and opinions, student can stay. Okay. And so that's a great question, Dominique, because what happens if the teacher is saying racial slurs and racist things and homophobic things, and so then what? Can the teacher be removed from the classroom for saying these things? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to our code of ethics that we talked about last week. But it also comes back to we as teachers have an obligation to meet the student and receive the student and take in the student as they are and then teach them. And the kinds of students that we get, the kinds of students that existed in classrooms 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, are not the types of students that you're going to get in 5 years. And for some of you, less than 5 years. Because students are changing. And the diversity and the ethnicity and all of these things in our classrooms are changing. Okay? And so we are faced with the dilemma, do we change as things change or do we stay the same? And so that's a personal decision. That's a choice that you as an educator will have to make. Do I adjust myself? Do I change to the environment? And that makes things a little bit easier for us, right? When we adjust to the environment, that's evolution, that's adaptability. Or do we say, no, this is who I am, this is how I am, this is how I teach, and the students have to deal with me. And so that dilemma, that internal dilemma, is something that every teacher faces, right? You guys have probably seen it in your lifetime with cell phones. Okay, I want you to think back to 7th grade. Okay, for some of you that was recently, for some of you that was a little while ago. Think back to 7th grade. Okay, in 7th grade, what was the policy in your school for cell phones? So I'm going to ask 3 of you. So I want everybody to think back. What was the cell phone policy at your school when you were in 7th grade? Okay, so Valeria Rocha, in 7th grade, were you allowed to use your cell phones in school or not? No, my mom for emergencies. Only for emergencies, right? So like, did it have to be put away or could you have it on your desk? It had to be put away. Did it have to be off or could it be on and put away? Off. Off, right? So pretty strict on cell phones. Thank you, Valeria. Luis Aguilar, what about you? 7th grade, what was the policy on cell phones? Cell phones were and it could be on when muted for all notifications. It is not using cell phones. You will actually find this in the file. Right? I remember this. Okay, they would pick up the phone, they would turn it into the office, and did your parent have to come or could you pick it up, Luis? Parent had to come and pay for it, right? Like, I didn't understand that when I was teaching, that the parent had to pay for something that they already owned. I never understood that, but that was the policy, okay? Thank you, Luis. And Esmer, tell me the cell phone policy when you were in 7th grade. Right? So pretty strict a few years ago. So now, and I'm going to ask this question, how many of you are in class right now on your cell phone? Like, how many of you are using your cell phone to interact with the class right now? So 1, 2, Belinda. Anybody else? 3, and then Steph. Anybody else? It's okay. So I'm going to count you. So 5 out of 17, 8, okay, or 6, I'm sorry, 5, 6, 7, Alicia, 8, Jackie. Anybody else? So about half the class right now in 2020, this is the tool that we're using to learn with, right? To interact, to communicate, to learn. And so we have adapted. Teachers are forced to adapt because if I say you cannot use your cell phone, now I am removing the opportunity for you to learn. So the same way that we have to adapt with technology, we have to adapt with ethnicities, with gender, with sexual orientation, with language, with religious beliefs, with political beliefs. Because if we don't, are we then removing the opportunity for our students to learn? And sometimes the adapting and the changing has to be put aside, or has to be important and more important than our beliefs, which we have to put aside, because the most important thing for us as educators is to make sure that we retain the integrity of our instruction. And so if the thing that we have to remove is a student, or the thing that we have to remove is a policy like no cell phones, or the thing that we have to remove is our belief that something is bad or wrong, then that thing becomes less important than retaining the structural integrity, the instructional integrity of teaching our students. And sometimes making that decision to get rid of whatever this thing happens to be is really hard. But this, teaching students, no matter how they come to us, gay, straight, male, female, non-binary, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist, all of these things that the students are, poor, rich, advantaged, disadvantaged, English speaking, Spanish speaking, Vietnamese speaking, all of this is more important than the thing or belief or opinion that I have as a teacher that's going to keep me from teaching these kids to the best of my ability. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah, right? And so that is a hard thing, because we are humans, and humans have biases, and humans have opinions. And so the challenge for us as educators is, how do we face that and adjust, right? And so what that takes is us understanding ourselves, understanding what our biases are. And sometimes we have biases and we don't even know that we have these biases. And so that's why, as educators, we need to be open to feedback. Okay, we need to be open to saying, hey, Mr. Vasquez, I heard you talking to a student, and I heard you mention that you knew that they were a good person because they were a Christian. And maybe we need to think about how we talk about religion with our students. And so as an open-minded person, Mr. Vasquez is like, oh man, I can't believe I even said that. Thank you for bringing it up, and I'll be more careful next time. Now, the other response that you could get is, hey, that's what I think, and if you have a problem with it, or the student has a problem with it, that's their problem. Now, we have the burden of, how do I react? How do I respond to that feedback? And do I adjust, right? Because we adjust and we grow and we get better. Or do I hold on to this and I say, this is how I am, and the student needs to adjust to me? And the burden is always on the teacher. Okay, the burden is always on the teacher to adjust, because our primary purpose is to help and educate the students. And sometimes that's hard. Especially, and I'm going to come back to this, especially because things are changing. Students are changing. And so the schools we had 100 years ago and 50 years ago and 20 years ago are not the same schools that you will have in 5 years when you're teaching. And as a perfect example, if you had told me last August that I was going to be an online educator, I would have said never. I love talking to my students. I love interacting with my students. It is the only way that I will teach is if I get to be face to face with my students. That's what I would have told you a year ago. Do I love teaching online? No. But if this is how I have to adjust and what I have to do to educate my students and maintain the integrity of the instruction and what I'm doing as my job and my passion, then that's how I adjust, right? And so your students are going to come to you with a lot of different things that you have to adjust to. You're going to be talking about kids that have language issues, kids that are being raised in poverty. And in different parts of the country, you have different levels of affluence, different levels of support and success. And I'm so sorry, guys. And that's going to impact how you teach. So I'm going to give you an example. When I started teaching, I was a second grade teacher, and I was in a team of 5. So there were 5 of us. Of the 5, there was one experienced teacher, and she had 2 years of experience. So pretty much all of us were brand new teachers. Of the 5 of us that were teachers, 2 of us were from La Jolla. Myself and Miss, what was her name? Miss Gomez. Her name was Miss Gomez. Okay. Not this Miss Gomez, not our principal Miss Gomez, but her name was Miss Gomez. So Miss Gomez and I were from La Jolla. We had graduated together. We went to different colleges, but we were super excited to be working together because we knew each other for a long time. The other 3 teachers were not from our district. And so we were teaching at one of the poorest campuses, one of the campuses in one of the most impoverished parts of our district. And I remember that we were having a meeting, and it was maybe the second week of school, and one of the teachers, not myself and not Miss Gomez, one of the teachers was saying, I don't understand why the students can't just bring me the 4 packs of pencils that I'm asking for. And I said, well, if they don't, then what happens? And she says, if they can't bring in the pencils, they can't do the work, and they're not going to pass second grade. And in my head, that didn't make any sense. Because if the student doesn't have a pencil, how easy is it for me to give them one? And so understanding the district, understanding the area where I was working, having grown up myself as a student that did not always have the supplies that I needed for school, to me, that didn't make any sense. If the student doesn't have a pencil, give them a pencil. Because my job and my passion is teaching kids. And as an educator, as someone who was informed, I knew that the kids that we had in that school could not always afford the supplies like pencils and papers and crayons and markers and things like that. So that teacher did not have that same understanding and that paradigm. To that teacher, it was, if I can provide the pencils for my child, and if I have always been able to have pencils as a student, then these kids should always be able to have pencils. And so that's something that we have to look at, right? And so for our children of poverty, is it more important that we stand our ground and the parent and the student has to provide the materials? Or is it more important that we teach them and we make sure that they can learn? And if that means giving them the pencil, then that's on us. And again, it comes back to us adapting and changing and making sure that we can meet the student where they are and teach them, as opposed to making sure that we stand our ground on something that's important to us. Martin has a question. Is there a male-female preference when it comes to high school teachers? There is not. And so for teachers everywhere, the preference is, are you certified in the field that you're trying to teach? And are you going to be able to teach it well? And so that's a really good question, because I'll give you an example. My cousin's husband. So my cousin is like my sister. She just got married in December. So some of you that were with me last year know this, that I was in her wedding and it was beautiful and amazing and took up a lot of my time. Her husband is an English teacher. He just got hired. It's his first year teaching. He's an English teacher at Palmview High School. I was talking to him last night and he was telling me that his English department is 16 teachers and there are 2 male teachers teaching English there. And I was telling him, well, that makes sense because at my high school, there's 4 English teachers and only 1 male. But if you look at our math department is mostly male. And so it's not necessarily a gender preference, but you're going to find at different high schools that the distribution is different. So for example, at Jimmy Carter, the preference tends to be, do you have a master's or are you working on a master's degree? And that's mostly what we look at in our campus. Different campuses are going to look at different things. I know that some campuses are looking at what certificate do you have. So for example, in science, I have a composite certificate, which means I can teach biochem, physics, environmental science, forensics, anatomy and physiology. I am certified to teach astronomy, not astrology, astronomy, aquatic sciences, environmental, like I can teach all kinds of science classes. Or are you going to hire this person with this certificate, or are you going to hire somebody that just has a life science certificate and can teach biology and environmental science only? And so those things tend to be more important in education than the gender of the teacher. And so you're right. In medical professions, it tends to be a male-dominated field. Education still, in a lot of places, more rural places, tends to be a female-dominated field. But that is also changing and evolving. And so on that note, as we talk about change and evolution, is where we're going to stop. Tomorrow, we're going to pick up and we're going to talk about self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's really an interesting topic and an important topic. And then tomorrow, we're going to wrap up with gender roles. And so that was a really great transition. And so thank you for that, Luis. Are we going to talk about the assignments? Yes, Dominique, we can. What's your question on the assignments for this week?
I saw the interview. There's a specific person I have to work with.
choose whoever you'd like. Yeah, that one's open. So you can interview. I know somebody turned it in and they interviewed themselves, and that's fine. You can choose another student in this class. You can anyone as long as it's a student. And so what you're doing is you're getting feedback, you're asking those questions to get a student's perspective. And so you guys are really unique because the class is designed as a college course. We deliver it to high school students who are in college, but the assignment is for any student. So if you want to be really different, because this has never happened in the years that I've been teaching this class, you could interview a student at an elementary or middle school level and see their thoughts are about their teachers. And that would be really interesting because we haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen it yet. Dominique. And so for Lab 2, your assignment is to interview a student, and it can be any student. So for that question, Dominique. Thanks. Anything else for today, guys? If we don't have anything else for today, then I will see you all tomorrow. Bye, guys. Thanks. You too. Bye.